Last Thursday afternoon, my 32-year-old daughter-in-law Jessica called me to inform me that effective immediately, I would no longer be allowed to visit or have any contact with my 3 grandchildren, because she had decided that at 71 years old I was too old and confused to be a safe and appropriate influence on their development, and that my presence around the children was creating concerns about their safety and well-being that she could no longer ignore or accommodate in their household. What Jessica didn't know as she delivered her devastating ultimatum about my supposed mental decline and her decision to permanently cut off my relationship with my beloved grandchildren was that I am actually the legal owner of the beautiful 4-bedroom house where she lives with my son Marcus and their 3 children. Having secretly purchased the property 18 months ago and arranged for them to live there rent-free, while believing they were renting from a private landlord who had offered them an unusually generous lease agreement. I'm Harold Peterson. I'm 71 years old, and this is the story of how my controlling daughter-in-law's cruel decision to weaponize my grandchildren and ban me from their lives because of false claims about my mental capacity led to the most shocking property ownership revelation that would teach her that cutting elderly relatives out of children's lives can have devastating consequences for her family's housing security and financial stability. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The foundation of this family crisis begins 3 years ago when my son Marcus, who is 34 years old and works as a mid-level accountant for a regional business consulting firm, married Jessica Thompson, an ambitious and controlling woman who immediately established herself as the primary decision-maker in their relationship and began implementing strict rules about family interactions and household management that prioritized her preferences and comfort over traditional family relationships and extended family involvement in their children's lives. Jessica's approach to marriage and family life included clear expectations that Marcus would prioritize her opinions and decisions over input from his parents or other relatives, with particular emphasis on limiting my influence and involvement in their household affairs and child-rearing decisions that she believed should be determined exclusively by the nuclear family, without interference from grandparents who might have different values or approaches to child development and family relationships. During the early months of Marcus and Jessica's marriage, my relationship with my new daughter-in-law was polite but tense, as I quickly recognized her desire to control family dynamics and her resistance to the close relationships that Marcus had maintained with me and his late mother throughout his adult life, particularly our tradition of regular family dinners and holiday celebrations that had been important sources of connection and family continuity. Jessica's discomfort with our established family traditions was evident in her suggestions for modifying holiday celebrations and family gatherings to accommodate her preferences for smaller, more intimate celebrations that would reduce the influence of extended family members and create new traditions that reflected her vision of appropriate family relationships and social activities for their household. My attempts to accommodate Jessica's preferences while maintaining meaningful relationships with Marcus and their growing family required careful navigation of her sensitivities and her tendency to interpret family traditions and grandparent involvement as criticism of her parenting abilities or interference with her authority as the primary caregiver and household manager for their children. The birth of their first child, Emma, 2.5 years ago, initially created opportunities for positive interactions between Jessica and me, as she appeared to appreciate my willingness to help with childcare and my enthusiasm for being an involved grandfather who could provide support and assistance during the challenging early months of parenthood, when new parents typically benefit from family support and guidance. However, Jessica's initial appreciation for my involvement with Emma gradually shifted to concern and control as she began implementing strict rules about my interactions with the baby, including restrictions on feeding schedules, play activities, and the stories and songs I could share during my visits, revealing her determination to maintain complete authority over all aspects of child-rearing, without accommodation for grandparent preferences or traditional family practices. The birth of their second child, Lucas, 18 months ago, coincided with Jessica's increasing assertiveness about limiting my role in the children's lives, and her growing list of complaints about my behavior and my approach to grandparent relationships that she characterized as outdated, inappropriate, and potentially harmful to the children's development and their families' modern parenting strategies. Jessica's restrictions on my grandparent activities expanded to include limitations on gift-giving, storytelling, physical affection, and even the length and frequency of my visits, with detailed explanations about child development research and modern parenting approaches that supposedly supported her position that traditional grandparent relationships were potentially problematic and needed to be carefully managed and controlled. The birth of their third child, Sophie, 8 months ago, marked the beginning of Jessica's most aggressive campaign to limit my involvement with the grandchildren, with increasingly frequent complaints about my supposed confusion, inappropriate comments, and unsafe behaviors that she claimed were creating risks for the children's well-being and requiring constant supervision that was burdensome for their busy household. Jessica's allegations about my mental decline and unsafe behavior were completely false and appeared to be manufactured justifications for her predetermined decision to exclude me from the children's lives, as my cognitive abilities and physical health remained excellent, and my interactions with the children were consistently appropriate, loving, and beneficial for their emotional development and family connections. My son, Marcus's response to Jessica's escalating restrictions on my grandparent relationship was disappointing and revealed the extent of her control over his decision-making and his willingness to prioritize marital harmony over family loyalty, and his children's relationships with their grandfather, who had been a loving and supportive presence throughout his own childhood and adult life. Marcus's attempts to mediate between Jessica's demands and my desire to maintain meaningful relationships with my grandchildren were ineffective and often resulted in him supporting Jessica's position, while asking me to be more understanding of her concerns and more accommodating of her parenting preferences, even when those preferences were based on false accusations and unreasonable restrictions. The financial pressures affecting Marcus and Jessica's household had been significant since their marriage, as their combined incomes were insufficient to support their desired lifestyle and housing situation in a good neighborhood with excellent schools that would provide their children with optimal educational opportunities and social advantages that Jessica considered essential for their family's success and social advancement. Marcus and Jessica's housing search 18 months ago had been frustrating and disappointing, as the homes they could afford were either in less desirable neighborhoods or were smaller properties that wouldn't accommodate their growing family and Jessica's expectations for entertaining space and modern amenities that she believed were necessary for their social and professional networking activities. My decision to secretly purchase the house where Marcus and Jessica now live was motivated by my desire to ensure that my grandchildren would grow up in a safe, comfortable environment with good schools and stable housing, while also providing my son's family with financial relief that would reduce their stress and improve their quality of life, without creating obligations or debt that might burden their future financial planning. The property purchase was structured through a complex arrangement involving a property management company and legal entities that obscured my ownership, while creating the appearance that Marcus and Jessica were renting from a private landlord who had offered them an unusually generous lease agreement that included below-market rent and flexible terms that accommodated their family's needs and budget constraints. The beautiful four-bedroom house I purchased for their family included modern amenities, a large backyard perfect for children's play, and location in an excellent school district that would provide Emma, Lucas, and Sophie with educational opportunities that Marcus and Jessica could never have afforded on their own incomes, representing a substantial investment in my grandchildren's futures and their family's stability and comfort. The monthly rent that Marcus and Jessica believed they were paying to their landlord was actually being deposited into a savings account that I had established for their children's college education, ensuring that their housing payments would ultimately benefit their family's long-term financial security, while providing them with immediate housing stability and reduced financial stress during their children's early years. My anonymous financial support for their housing situation had enabled Jessica to reduce her work hours and focus more attention on the children's care and development, though she remained unaware that her ability to be a more hands-on mother was entirely dependent on the financial generosity of the same grandfather, whom she was systematically excluding from the children's lives through false accusations and manufactured concerns. The irony of Jessica's campaign to limit my involvement with the grandchildren while simultaneously benefiting from my substantial financial support for their housing and lifestyle was particularly painful, as her comfortable home environment and reduced financial stress were directly funded by the grandfather she was portraying as confused and dangerous to the children's well-being and family stability. Jessica's escalating restrictions on my grandparent relationship reached crisis levels 6 months ago, when she began requiring supervised visits and implementing detailed rules about my conversations and activities with the children, including prohibitions on discussing family history, sharing stories about their father's childhood, and engaging in traditional grandparent activities that she claimed were inappropriate or potentially harmful to modern child development approaches. The supervised visit requirements were humiliating and created artificial barriers between the children and me that interfered with natural grandparent-grandchild bonding and prevented the development of the close relationships that had been important sources of love, wisdom, and family continuity for previous generations in our family history and traditions. Jessica's justifications for the increasing restrictions included vague references to child development research and modern parenting philosophies that supposedly supported her position that traditional extended family relationships needed to be carefully managed and controlled to prevent negative influences on children's psychological development and social adjustment. My attempts to address Jessica's concerns through direct conversation were met with additional accusations and expanded restrictions, revealing that her goal was not to resolve legitimate issues, but to systematically eliminate my presence and influence from the children's lives, while maintaining the appearance of reasonable parenting decisions based on contemporary child welfare concerns. The final escalation toward complete exclusion began 3 months ago when Jessica started documenting alleged incidents of confusion and inappropriate behavior during my visits, creating a false narrative of declining mental capacity that would justify her ultimate decision to ban me from contact with the grandchildren for their supposed protection and safety. Jessica's fabricated documentation included exaggerated descriptions of normal grandparent interactions and mischaracterized statements that were presented as evidence of confusion and inappropriate behavior. Though anyone with honest observation would recognize that my interactions with the children were consistently loving, appropriate, and beneficial for their emotional development and family connections. The devastating phone call last Thursday that informed me of Jessica's decision to permanently ban me from contact with my grandchildren was the culmination of her systematic campaign to eliminate my presence from their lives, while maintaining the financial benefits of living in the house that I had secretly purchased to ensure their comfort and stability. Jessica's ultimatum about my supposed mental decline and the safety concerns that justified cutting off my relationship with Emma, Lucas, and Sophie was delivered with finality and arrogance that revealed her confidence in her authority to make unilateral decisions about family relationships without considering the emotional impact on the children or the broader family consequences of her actions. The immediate aftermath of Jessica's ultimatum included my devastation about losing contact with my beloved grandchildren and my anger about the false accusations and manipulative tactics she had used to justify her cruel decision to weaponize the children and use them as tools to punish me for not conforming to her vision of appropriate family dynamics. My response to Jessica's ultimatum was a request for a family meeting that would include Marcus and would allow me to present important information about their housing situation that might influence their understanding of family relationships and the potential consequences of Jessica's decision to exclude me from the children's lives based on false premises and manufactured concerns. Jessica's confident agreement to a family meeting revealed her belief that she held complete authority over family decisions, and that any discussion would only confirm her right to protect her children from negative influences, without considering alternative perspectives or broader family consequences that might result from her unilateral decisions about grandparent relationships. The family meeting took place at their house the following Saturday afternoon, with Marcus present but clearly uncomfortable about the conflict between his wife and his father, while Jessica displayed obvious confidence about her position and her expectation that the meeting would result in my acceptance of her decision and my agreement to respect her authority over access to the grandchildren. Jessica's opening statements at the family meeting included repetitions of her concerns about my mental decline and detailed explanations of her parenting philosophy that prioritized child safety and modern development approaches over traditional family relationships that she characterized as potentially harmful and inappropriate for contemporary child-rearing practices and family dynamics. My response to Jessica's statements was the presentation of comprehensive documentation that revealed my ownership of their house and the complex financial arrangements that had enabled their comfortable lifestyle and housing stability over the past 18 months, including property deeds, mortgage records, and bank statements that demonstrated the substantial investment I had made in their family's well-being and security. Jessica's reaction to learning about my ownership of their house was immediate shock and disbelief, followed by growing horror as she realized that her comfortable home environment and her ability to focus on the children's care were completely dependent on the continued generosity of the same grandfather, whom she had just banned from contact with his grandchildren, based on false accusations of mental decline and safety concerns. The documentation I presented included detailed financial records showing the below-market rent arrangement and the college savings account where their monthly payments were being deposited, along with property management agreements that demonstrated how I had structured their housing situation to provide maximum benefit for their family, while maintaining anonymity about my financial support and property ownership. Marcus's reaction to discovering my ownership of their house was embarrassment and gratitude mixed with concern about the family conflict that Jessica's behavior had created, as he realized that his father had been providing substantial financial support for their family, while being systematically excluded from meaningful relationships with his grandchildren through his wife's false accusations and manufactured restrictions. The revelation about the house ownership also included information about my original intentions for the property as a long-term family asset that would provide stability for the children's upbringing and would eventually be transferred to Marcus and Jessica as part of their inheritance. Though Jessica's treatment of me had raised serious questions about the wisdom of such generous financial planning. Jessica's desperate attempts to minimize the significance of my property ownership and maintain her authority over grandparent access were met with my clear explanation that her ability to continue living in the house was entirely dependent on my continued willingness to provide anonymous financial support that her cruel treatment of me had seriously jeopardized through her demonstration of ingratitude and family disloyalty. The family meeting continued with my detailed explanation of the sacrifices I had made to purchase and maintain their housing situation, including the use of substantial portions of my retirement savings, and my decision to live more modestly in order to ensure that my grandchildren would grow up in a comfortable environment with excellent educational opportunities and family stability. Jessica's growing panic about the potential loss of their housing situation was evident as she realized that her campaign to exclude me from the children's lives had been directed toward the person whose financial generosity was enabling their comfortable lifestyle and providing the stable home environment that she valued so highly for her family's social advancement and the children's development. My explanation of the housing arrangement also included discussion of my hopes that my investment in their family's stability would strengthen our relationships and provide opportunities for meaningful grandparent-grandchild connections that would benefit the children's emotional development and family identity, rather than being taken for granted while I was systematically excluded through false accusations and manufactured concerns. The revelation about my property ownership created an immediate shift in family dynamics, with Jessica's authority and confidence being undermined by her newfound awareness of her financial vulnerability, and her dependence on the grandfather whom she had just attempted to eliminate from her children's lives through cruel and manipulative tactics based on completely false premises. Marcus's attempts to mediate between Jessica's panic and my justified anger were complicated by his recognition that his wife's behavior had been inappropriate and potentially damaging to their family's financial security, and their children's relationships with their grandfather, who had demonstrated extraordinary generosity and love through his anonymous financial support and property investment. The immediate consequences of the housing revelation included Jessica's desperate attempts to apologize and retract her ban on my contact with the grandchildren, with promises to change her approach to family relationships and expressions of gratitude that were clearly motivated by her fear of losing their housing situation, rather than genuine recognition of her inappropriate behavior and false accusations. Jessica's panic about potential eviction and the disruption to their children's stability created immediate pressure for her to modify her position about my mental capacity and safety concerns, though the sincerity of her sudden change in attitude remained questionable given her obvious motivation to protect their housing security rather than acknowledge her mistakes and recommit to appropriate family relationships. My response to Jessica's desperate apologies and promises was measured and focused on the need for genuine behavioral change and authentic respect for grandparent relationships, rather than temporary adjustments motivated by fear of financial consequences. With clear expectations that any improvement in my access to the grandchildren would need to be sustained and sincere, rather than performative and self-serving. The family meeting concluded with my statement that their housing situation would continue based on their demonstration of appropriate family relationships and respect for my role as the children's grandfather, but that Jessica's awareness of my property ownership would serve as a permanent reminder that weaponizing children and making false accusations against elderly relatives can have serious consequences for family stability and financial security. Jessica's immediate implementation of changes to her restrictions on my grandparent relationship was obvious and dramatic, with phone calls that same evening to arrange visits and expressions of appreciation that contrasted sharply with her previous hostility and false accusations, though the authenticity of her transformation would need to be evaluated through consistent behavior over time. The children's excitement about renewed access to their grandfather was immediate and heartwarming, revealing that they had missed our relationship and had been confused and hurt by the artificial barriers that Jessica had created between us through her systematic campaign to limit our contact and undermine our family connections. Marcus's relief about the resolution of the family conflict was evident, though he remained concerned about the underlying issues that had created Jessica's controlling behavior and her willingness to make false accusations about his father's mental capacity in order to justify her desire to exclude him from their family life and the children's emotional development. The subsequent weeks included Jessica's continued efforts to demonstrate appreciation and respect for my role in their children's lives, with obvious attempts to rebuild our relationship and create positive family dynamics that would ensure continued housing stability and financial support, though her motivations remained primarily focused on practical concerns rather than genuine family loyalty. My renewed relationship with Emma, Lucas, and Sophie was joyful and natural, as children's capacity for forgiveness and love allowed us to quickly restore our grandfather-grandchild bonds despite the artificial separation that Jessica's false accusations and restrictions had created during the previous months of family conflict and manipulation. The long-term implications of the housing revelation extended beyond immediate family dynamics to Jessica's understanding of family relationships and financial obligations, as she learned that elderly relatives might have more resources and influence than younger family members, assumed based on superficial assessments of power and authority in family decision-making. Jessica's behavior during subsequent family gatherings and holidays showed sustained improvement in her treatment of me and her acceptance of my role as an involved grandfather, though her compliance appeared to be motivated primarily by her awareness of her housing vulnerability, rather than genuine appreciation for grandparent relationships and family connections. The educational impact on the children was significant and positive, as they learned about the importance of family relationships and the complex ways that relatives support each other through love and generosity, while also witnessing the resolution of family conflicts through honest communication and the recognition of mutual dependence and shared interests. Marcus's relationship with me was strengthened through his recognition of my generosity and his embarrassment about Jessica's behavior, leading to more frequent father-son conversations, and his increased involvement in ensuring that his children maintained strong relationships with their grandfather, despite any future attempts at manipulation or control. The financial arrangements for their housing situation were formalized through updated legal documents that provided additional security for their family, while also establishing clear expectations about family relationships and respect for grandparent involvement in the children's lives as conditions for continued housing support and eventual property transfer. Jessica's attempts to rebuild trust and demonstrate authentic appreciation for my role in their family included voluntary changes to her parenting approaches and her acceptance of traditional grandparent activities that she had previously restricted, though the sustainability of these changes remained dependent on her continued awareness of her financial vulnerability and housing dependence. Today, 6 months after Jessica's ultimatum and the subsequent revelation of my property ownership, our family relationships have stabilized into patterns of mutual respect and genuine appreciation, with Jessica's behavior showing consistent improvement that appears to be developing into authentic recognition of my value as a grandfather and family member, rather than just fear-motivated compliance. The children's continued development in their stable home environment has been enhanced by restored grandparent relationships and the security of knowing that their family is supported by love and generosity from multiple generations, creating positive models for their understanding of family loyalty and intergenerational responsibility. Jessica's parenting approaches have evolved to include greater appreciation for traditional family relationships and recognition that children benefit from meaningful connections with grandparents who bring wisdom, love, and family history to their emotional development and sense of identity within broader family networks and community connections. The resolution of our family crisis through the revelation of my property ownership provided important lessons about the complex relationships between financial support and family dynamics, demonstrating that elderly relatives often contribute more to family stability than younger generations realize or acknowledge in their daily interactions and family planning. Marcus's professional development and family leadership have been strengthened through his recognition of family obligations and his commitment to ensuring that his children maintain strong relationships with their grandfather, while also managing his wife's tendencies toward control and manipulation that had threatened family unity and stability. The house that I purchased for their family continues to provide stability and comfort for my grandchildren's upbringing, while serving as a symbol of intergenerational love and support that demonstrates how family members can contribute to each other's well-being and success through generous planning and selfless financial decisions that prioritize future generations' opportunities and security. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.